Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Aaron, and we're creating a space where we can talk about the raw, real accountability and leadership. And today, I'm excited to bring to you one of my favorite people who has dealt with both accountability, addiction, and has lived a life that is just worthy of the call. And so, I'm excited to have a conversation with my brother, Zachary Rifkin. And so, please help me welcome all of you guys. Clap with me, my brother.
Nice.
Yeah. What's up, man?
What up, bro?
Man, when I thought about creating a space like this, when I was dreaming of like, how do I help tell people stories, and like, how do I both share my story of addiction, and how accountability has really like grounded me in who I am as a person. I've got to watch you grow in this area, and I think that you're one of my favorite people. Like, aside from the cameras and like turning off all the stuff, like for real, like you're one of my favorite people to watch when it comes to accountability, and how you've like just accepted it, like full send. There's times I've seen where you're like a pushback of it, but like it's really changed your world.
Yeah.
And you came from a place where you were ruled by addiction and by turmoil. For the people who are watching this, can you maybe just give a quick story of kind of where you were, and we'll talk about kind of where you're at now.
Sure. So my story kind of stems from, when I was a child. It started at a young age, as far back as I can remember, probably about 7 years old, and it probably might be a little sooner than that. But at 7 years old, I can remember thinking back of like sneaking out of my room for food at night. And it kind of just stemmed from there of like behaviors that I started as a young kid, from sneaking out of the room when everybody was sleeping to grab food, transition to taking mom cigarettes, and then just, transpired from there of a life of making, bad decisions, and leading up to that, it just escalated, from food to stealing cigarettes to smoking weed at 7 years old. And that was what I got introduced to as a child from the parent that we used to live with. And so it kind of stems from there of behaviors and things leading up to my life growing up.
Yeah. Give us one of the things I love about you is you often talk about people getting raw and real.
Let's hear the raw stuff.
Let's hear the raw stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Yes.
I appreciate trying to be a little sensitive, but for the people who are maybe watching this that need a little bit of encouragement of knowing that, they're not alone, maybe in like the whole addiction world, because that's one of the reasons why I feel like this thing exists, is because I want people to be able to know that they're not alone. For me as a business owner, I have gone through so many different seasons of life, and one thing that I didn't know was that there were other business owners that have dealt with addiction.
Sure.
And so there's other people out there who are, waiting to hear someone's story like yours. So 7 years old, sneaking out, smoking weed, smoking cigarettes. Where'd you go from there?
Where I went from there was from 7 years old up until 18 months ago when I sobered up, was just a life full of bad decisions and making wrong choices, hanging out with wrong people, trying to fit in was a big thing for me. Being a class clown, beating people up. I thought, being a class clown or beating people up on the way to school, people were going to accept me and think that I was, the cool guy. And all honesty, like now that I'm sober and get to reflect on these type of things,
Yeah.
it wasn't cool. It led me down a road of destruction, of poor decisions,
Yeah.
and just really made my life a living nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. I think back, like, as I'm sitting here just like having this conversation, um, uh, this is not like a glorification of what we've been through, or even like, I don't hold you to anything that we've been through, but I'm just thinking like,
Yeah.
I was introduced to drugs at a young age as well. Obviously given the environment that we were both living in as brothers.
Yeah.
But then like when I spiraled out of control, it was actually because of, our interaction with each other of drugs. And like, now even like looking at the person who introduced me to the thing that got me my felonies and got me locked up, like we get to sit together and like talk about how we're both like successful in life now.
Yes.
And it's mind blowing to think that like the people who started off one way and like where we're at now is just, it's mind blowing to me that we get to have a conversation around sobriety and accountability and
Yes.
leadership rather than around how much did you use, who was your connect.
Right.
And so I think it's just really cool. So 18 months ago was a pretty pivotal moment in your life. I got to watch you through many, many years of addiction. I was able to get out of it pretty early,
Yeah.
had some mess ups, but you were able to stay in it for quite some time.
Yeah.
And there was a turning point for you
Yeah.
18 months ago
Yeah.
that said, I'm done. What was that? Like, give us the raw, real stuff.
So I was in addiction from say 7 years old up until I was 34, 35 years old. You can do the math, not trying to glorify the years that I spent in darkness, but I spent a lot of years in darkness through addiction, through hurting family, through hurting coworkers, through hurting girlfriends, and then also like spending years, behind bars, locked up. And the turning point for me was I got tired. I got really tired of being alone, being locked up, being in that bondage of addiction that just robs you of your life. My life was robbed from addiction. And the big turning point for me was the last time I got locked up. I was in 23-hour lockdown with an hour out a day. Finally got maxed out due to multiple felonies. And I say I really did time the last time that I got locked up. And when I was locked up, I swore at that time, if you would have gave me a lie detector test and asked me if I were to use again, I probably would have passed it at that moment. Sure. One big thing for me is I've never had a program. I never had accountability. I never surrounded myself with people that told me that the things I was doing were wrong besides, close family.
Sure.
And at that time in my addiction, I wasn't ready to hear from family that what I was doing wasn't okay. So going back to being locked up, I got locked up in 2022 and I got out in 2023. I stayed sober for about a month after I got out. I got that job. I got back into the world. I got a paycheck. Yeah. And shortly after that, I relapsed. And I didn't know anything else. That was my story. Get locked up, get out, and just do the same thing, repeat the same behavior. And my last relapse was for about 5 months. And I'm grateful for those 5 months. A turning point for me was I became suicidal for the first time in my addiction. I was just so broken and so lost. And, one thing for me was hurting my family, seeing my dad just hurting while I was repeating the same behaviors. And I became suicidal and was about to end my life. And that was the big turning point for me. I've never experienced being suicidal or even the thoughts during my addiction. So that was one big turning point for me, was like, I'm not okay.
Right.
I was on felony probation and in the system, going to pee for probation dirty. And at that time, like when you're in addiction, you really don't care, I got so used to being locked up that like I was okay if that's what happened again, because I got so used to that environment and knew the ropes and know people in there and just fully accepted like that was my life. I was gonna live for the longest time. The enemy and the devil had me convinced that I was either gonna die or be locked up for the rest of my life. And I spent many years in that darkness of accepting that way of life. I like to tell people how I thought was some people are born to be lawyers or baseball players. And I fully believe I was born to be an addict and live in that lifestyle that I used to live, which is crime, crime, addiction, and jail, prison, institutions. And I fully accepted that that was who I was. That was my identity of a convict junkie. And I know now that I wasn't strong enough to take myself out of addiction. And I say that because of my previous history and how long I spent in darkness and all the years I spent locked up. Like, I wasn't strong enough myself, right, to take me out of that. Someone else had to intervene, right? And that's the big man of Sirius, right? That's the one that saved me to take me out of my addiction.
Yeah.
And I fully believe that.
Yeah. You've often talked about whenever I'm in, whether it be meetings or Celebrate Recovery or AA, like you always talk about surrender. And I've also heard you talk about how you've made yourself to be your own God. Tell us a little more about how did you come to the realization of like, oh, there's something else that's bigger than me. I'm actually not the guy.
So my story with the whole God thing is during my whole addiction in my life, I claimed to be atheist or agnostic.
Yeah.
God didn't line up with my lifestyle and how I lived my life. For me, I never was mad at God or blamed God for the things that I did. Deep down inside, I knew that I was the one making the choices that I was making. And so I was atheist or agnostic before I got sober. And I found God in recovery. And there's a line in the big book, and it says, no human power could have relieved me from my alcoholism or my addiction. And that was just like mind blowing for me. Going back, like when I first got sober, going to detox, going to residential rehab, and going to sober living. At that point, I still didn't know God. I thought I was the one making those decisions, sir,
Yeah.
I thought I was my own God, right? I worshiped myself, and coming to work a program, the 12-step program, reading the big book, working with other men that came before me, opened my eyes to, a power greater than myself, right?
Yeah.
And it's pretty crazy to think like I was my own God. Right. That was the truth. That's how I felt,
Yeah.
And today is much different. I know that my choices and what I do now comes from someone bigger than myself, because it's not me doing the work that I do today,
Right.
and it's been proven to me because if it was up to me, I'd still be making those same decisions, or I'd be still in those same behaviors.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's pretty heavy when it goes from being atheist to not believing to believing. And it's like really mind blowing and opened your eyes quite a bit. I like to tell guys like, I went from darkness to light. Like, my eyes are wide open now.
Right.
I was blind and now I can see, and it's amazing how life transforms after addiction. And going into what you say about like accountability and having men in your life was a huge step for me.
Yeah.
My accountability started in detox. There's a lady in detox that I'm good friends with today, and that held me accountable. 3 days into my detox, I wanted to leave detox. I saw other men and women in there leaving, talking about getting high. And it just made me want to leave too and go get high. 3 days into my detox, a good friend of mine, the detox supervisor, pulled me into her office, and she's like, "Zach, like, you're not going anywhere.
You're staying put.
You're staying put."
Yeah.
And I was on felony probation. Accountability looked like for me then was she told me she was going to call my probation officer,
Heck yeah.
you know,
What a savage.
and I was like, "Man, you got me," you know, like, so I knew I was going back to jail, you know.
Yeah.
I was on felony probation for a case that I just talked about that I caught in 2022. And that was what accountability looked like in my early recovery is, the detox supervisor pulling me into her office, just holding me accountable of staying in detox. And I talk to her quite often, and I thank her for that. I thank her for threatening you, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, you guys are savages in here.
Right.
And she did her job,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah.
And from detox, I went next door to residential rehab. Shout out to Unhooked Recovery in Mesa.
Let's go.
Is where I got sober at. They saved my life. From detox, I went over to residential rehab. Completed a program there. Yeah.
First time you've done anything.
First time I've completed anything.
Yeah.
A little background is I say I never really got sober in my 28 years of addiction. I would go to jail and sober up a little bit. Sure. Still in jail, I'd still be indulging and buying stuff and drinking hooch or whatever, you know. So I would sober up for a few days, and when stuff came in or somebody made something, you know, I'd be indulging. Right. That's how I spent my time, and that's what I knew. But going back to rehab, I completed a program there. This is my first time ever completing a program of my addiction.
Mm-hmm.
I go to detox here and there during my years of addiction, but I would stay 12 hours, right? 2 hours. The most I think I stayed in a detox was 24 hours, and I was right back out. So this was like my first time completing a program.
And how many days was that?
So detox was 7 days, and then I was in residential rehab for about 45 days. And kind of go back a little bit from detox. I thought I was good. A 7-day detox, I thought I was going home. You know, like, I'm good. I'm sober. I got this. I can go back home. And going back to the lady in detox, she's like, Zach, there's a program next door. And she introduced me to residential rehab. And I was like, I'll give it a shot. You know, I'll go next door and check it out. And, you know, she was doing her job. I'm so thankful for her and for, you know, showing me the process of what it looked like to get sober and the appropriate steps to get sober, from detox, residential rehab, a 45-day program. And even from there, I thought I was good. I'm about 50 something days sober. I got this. I'm sober now. Like, I can go home. And that wasn't the case. From residential rehab, I went to sober living, and I spent about 3.5 months there in sober living. And all this was like a 5-6 month process of, you know, detoxing and working on myself and being in my own thoughts and choices. You know, I had a choice whether to fix my life, clean my life up, or go back out. And I was desperate for a better life. I really was. So I did the appropriate steps to stay sober. And I also want to talk about, you know, going through that process of detox and residential rehab and sober living. Of course, you're around other drug addicts, alcoholics, and some people aren't there that are ready to get clean and sober. You see people doing drugs, and I've seen people overdose in my sober living house, finding their drugs, and going through that process is really, really hard.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people make it out sober or even to complete that program because you're around other alcoholic drug addicts, And I thank God for that process that I made it out without using. I was there for a reason this time, to clean my life up and to, make better decisions. Little by little, I was starting to be the example in that process of sober living, mainly, other people using drugs and drinking. And I had a choice to make at those times. I had a choice whether to indulge or to stay sober. And I'm grateful that I stayed sober through that process, yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So now 18 months in, and counting, you have kind of submitted yourself to this idea of constant accountability. I think that, like, for me, like when I created this idea of creating content, like I've always thought, like, okay, it's just a leadership, content creation. But for me, like when I really think about what it boils down to, and how people receive leadership or how people do leadership well, it's through accountability. And for me, I know that the areas in my life that I've been the most effective, it's when I've had effective accountability. It's when I chose to do the deep work of accountability, of allowing someone to come into my life where they got to see the raw, real stuff where maybe not everybody did. I just did some content around being authentic with everybody, but be transparent with a few people.
Sure.
And one of the things I've seen in you recently is you're the same person in every room.
Yeah.
You're not different. You don't put on a face. And one thing I often hear you say is like, I'm still going to be Zach.
Right.
And like, I love that about you. Like, you're not changing who you are. You're just changing how you do things.
Right.
And that's been in the process of accountability, of really allowing a very select few people into your world.
Sure.
To maybe poke at the bear a little bit, maybe when like you're going through something. And so today, what are some like routines that you have when maybe you notice there's some old tendencies, frustrations, either habits? What are some of the things that you're doing to remind yourself of how far you've come, but also to like where you're going?
Sure. One thing I can say is what keeps me moving forward is thinking about what it used to be like. I spent a lot of years in darkness, and that's one big thing that keeps me moving forward, is not forgetting about where I came from and what it used to be like. And back to like accountability, the people that I seek accountability from, I have to be willing to take their advice and listen to the thing that they say to me.
Right.
If I ask somebody for accountability and they tell me to do A, B, and C,
Right.
then I have to do A, B, and C.
Right.
It's not like you're asking for accountability and then not doing what they say.
Sure.
It's kind of like respecting on how or what they tell you, or what they say to do.
Right.
That's what accountability is to me, is listening to the people that I seek accountability here. Obviously I'm seeking accountability from someone that knows a little bit more than I do. So it would be foolish for me not to listen to these men that I seek accountability from. Like, I'm here to listen and to gain knowledge and to do what they say.
Yeah.
I think I'm well off listening to somebody else that has a little bit more experience or a little bit more knowledge than I do.
Yeah.
Everything I do is from someone else. I check with a few different guys on choices or decisions that I make, you know, to make sure that that's the right decision or choice, you know. And sometimes I get told things that I don't like to hear,
Right.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm like, man, did he really just tell me that? But then, like, I think I'm like, he's right,
Sure.
you know?
Or even if like, what happens when you're maybe in that moment where someone, we've wrestled, I feel like, through this together in different areas, like maybe like in the moment when you're like, I don't want to believe what you're saying. I want to be right in this moment. Like, you've wrestled through moments like that, even between us, like where like we're having conversations, or you've brought up like someone else have said something and you're trying to wrestle through, like, but then you realize maybe you go and do the thing, or you don't listen. How quick are you now today to just try the advice of the person rather than second guess? Like, what does that look like for you when you're like in the moment?
Sure. And I've had some things happen to me even recently. I'm not perfect and I'm still learning.
Heck yeah.
You know,
Yeah, same.
I'm not perfect by all means. And sometimes there are times where I still have to figure out things the hard way.
Yeah.
And it's happened,
Yeah.
you know, but the difference is today is I get to work through those times and come back to that person and let them know, like, hey, you're right. And thanks for opening my eyes to that. So now where I can reflect and, you know, tell this person, you were right,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but I learned the hard way sometimes,
Sure.
you know, and I'm not naive or I'm not afraid to admit my wrong.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm pretty open to where, like, before, I wouldn't even talk about my wrongs or admit that I was wrong here. Sure. I made the wrong decision. The difference is now, I get to come to that person and be like, you're right. You know, and it's happened between me and you.
Totally.
A couple of situations where I was in, and, did I listen fully? No.
Sure.
But did I learn from it and we're able to talk about it? Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's where that's where it's at for me, is just knowing my mistakes and be able to learn and grow from them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, like, I'm not perfect and I have a long ways to go,
Sure.
but these are the things I get to do today.
Right.
Is actually think about what I do, what choices I make.
Yeah. There's a scripture that says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend," and I've heard it said, like our pastor says, "Friends will stab you in the front." And I've said that in a video before too, but like I want to explore that a little bit deeper, because like what happens is we've been so accustomed to living in a life of addiction and running from things that like we're typically getting stabbed in the back quite often. So when someone comes to us and is like, stabs us in the front of like, hey, you shouldn't do that, our first thing to do is like, let's go in defensive mode, right?
Sure.
Like, you don't know me, you don't know better than I do, or you know, we don't understand that like that person's actually looking out for our best intention.
Yeah.
And there's so many times in my life where I can look back and I'm like, that person was just trying to stab me in the front. Like they were trying to tell me the hard thing that I needed to hear.
Right.
And you know, so many times in my life where I've looked at so many different areas where I'm like, gosh, either I wish I would have had someone to, or I wish I would have listened to when that person was trying to stab me in the front. I remember when I was going through some stuff, and I had told our pastor, I was like, hey, like, I really wish I had accountability in those seasons. He's like, well, you had access to it.
Sure.
And I was like, gosh, dang it. And so the realization I think that we need to have is there's accountability around us always. And understanding that who to choose from is really important. You know, we're not just going to go bleed over everybody.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to know the deepest, darkest side of us, but that's a saved, sacred place for a very select few people, for them to help us walk through
Sure.
those problems and those things that we're dealing with. But that doesn't mean that we can't be authentic with everybody.
Yeah.
Like I think too many times that we were in a conversation today where someone was like, it's where I went to rehab, and like they whispered, I'm like, dude, be proud of that. Right. Like,
Yeah.
like that's where you went and got your life cleaned up.
Yeah.
You know, like there doesn't need to be a space where you are hiding from it. Like that's just being authentic of like, that's where I was and this is where I'm at now. I I've gotten to watch you, and I often say like I endeavor to be the dumbest person in the room that I'm in. I like to learn from the people who have been there before me, and like you've run and gun pretty freaking hard,
Right.
and I've got to learn a lot from you. And so I have some questions just about like um, how you've received leadership, and then how you are now executing leadership through accountability. We both just graduated from Genesis Leadership Collective, which is a
Yeah.
leadership track for our church, but it really instills a lot of just good leadership qualities in us.
Right.
And so, how do you discern now when you're leading? Is this for me in my leadership, or is this for me to teach someone else? Like, what are the tools that you kind of walk through in your brain of you're like, oh, like I've received this, I've kind of eaten the meat enough, I can now like regurgitate this. Like, what does it look like when you've learned something, and how do you give it to someone else?
Right. So everything I do is pretty much, learned from someone that's came before me, that shown me the way, and that's up to me to give back, what I've been shown or what I've been taught or what someone says to me. And one big word that comes to my mind is being an example, being an example of living life. I won't say the right way, but living life to your full potential in the right direction, you know. Yeah, do I make mistakes? Yeah, am I not perfect? But I'm striving to be that better person every day.
Yeah.
Like you said, we just both completed a leadership program through our church, and I'm grateful for that. That's one step forward in making me a better leader to everybody around me. People tell me like it's attractive. It's attractive to be a leader. People are drawn towards it.
Yeah.
How you carry yourself, how you look at people, and what you give out is what you receive. And people didn't used to like being around me, and I think they do now. I like to think they and people are just excited, when they're around me. Yeah. And for me, I spent so many years in darkness to where I don't have the time to be, that glum lot of depression and down and out. Do I get that way sometimes?
Sure.
Sure. But for the most part, like I'm happy, joyous, and free. I don't got time to be that glum lot of, I like to be excited.
Yeah.
One early thing I heard when I got sober is if you're not having fun with it, then what's the point? And today I like to have fun with what I do, whether that's through work or through recovery, working with other men, whether it's going to church or, just everybody around me, to be that person of excitement, that life is fun,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I think of like a lot of times people think that like leadership is this oh, you're the CEO of a company, you're the manager of a company, or there's like this big notion that like leadership means that it comes with like a position, and I think that if we're not careful, sometimes that we can see leadership as this thing that it's like something I have to achieve, whereas leadership is something that we get to earn.
Sure.
Right.
I
Like
agree.
we get to be in this position where like leadership is actually developed. It's a learned behavior.
Yeah.
And if we're not careful, scripture says, don't promote someone too early, for they become like feed for the wild beast.
Sure.
Right. And so
Wow.
like as we're learning what leadership looks like and how we're being developed, I think that if we're not doing it through the lens of accountability, having other men around us, I think that's one of the biggest things that I hear in your life is that you've drawn people close to you to kind of pick out the holes,
Sure.
or like pick at the holes that maybe need to be filled with godly wisdom, good wisdom that's gonna help edify you into a better
Sure.
position of leadership. But that thought of like leadership being it's saved for the CEO, or it's saved for the person who runs the company, there's a very well-known person. His name is Craig Rochelle, and he says leadership is influence. Influence is leadership. So it's like you're leading somebody,
Sure.
right? Like you're always leading somebody. Whether it's if you're not leading anybody, you're leading yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that I have loved about you is like you don't mess around when it comes to like leading yourself,
Right.
and like watching you being able to pull yourself out of those moments where it could feel like there's no hope, frustration, but it's like, no, I have a bigger cause now,
Yeah.
right? Like I have more to offer in this life today than I did before. I mean, it's so cool to hear. Like, I mean, when I say things like you're one of my favorite people, like I really mean it. Like for real. Like to watch you grow and like learn. Like we have at the GLC thing. It was like who's the one person or whatever. Whatever the thing is said at GLC, and it said who's the one person that changed something or whatever. And like I wrote you down in that because it was like I got to watch you like wrestle through the hardest things and like question things that you were like, I don't know how to do this, but like you brought people close in those times, and it's just really encouraging to watch you grow. And I think it's a fun thing to do together. Like nowadays, like I get to think about recording a podcast with my friend and my brother, like, and you're the first one, like, like how cool is that, and so I'm thankful for your investment into leadership and your investment into your accountability, because you have shown me what it looks like to submit myself and to fully submit to something that's bigger than myself, because I can't influence anybody unless I'm submitted to something. Right. And we have found this thing that's greater, bigger than ourselves, which is God. And, we have and are pursuing him as best as we can. And we're also bringing people alongside us to make our lives better. And so I'm just so thankful to have accountability with you, have you as one of my accountabilities.
Sure.
Might
not like it all the time.
That's for dang sure. And I think that's one thing that I think we
we're brothers,
Yeah.
we're brothers, and we know each other, and sometimes
Sure.
we'll tell each other the stuff that we don't like to hear.
Totally. Yep.
But that's what we get to do these days, and I'm grateful for it too, bro.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun life. And if you could maybe look into the camera lens, and if someone is dealing with addiction, someone has maybe thought this is the end of the road for me, I want to give up, I would love for you just to kind of encourage them as we close this thing out of just encourage them of what worked for you, and what they can do to manage and to get out of the lifestyle of addiction.
One thing I would say is don't give up on yourself, and it's never too late to change. As long as you keep coming back and learning from your mistakes, just keep coming back. Keep persisting your dreams and goals, and also I would tell you to trust the process and the men and women that come before you. Just listen to what they say, and take the suggestions they take. Everybody that I listened to did not steer me in the wrong direction. Everything they told me wasn't, they didn't tell me to go back out and use drugs. They told me to go to residential rehab. One big thing is I would just listen to the people that come before you, and take the suggestions that they suggest to you. They're trying to help you change your life and to get you on the right track. So if I can tell anybody out there that's struggling with addiction, trust the process, and go through that process, strong-hearted, and know that you're there for a purpose.
That's good.
So,
yeah, I think oftentimes we should recognize that we stand on the shoulders of giants. Like we wouldn't be where we are today if someone didn't believe in us first to say, hey, you can do it.
Right.
Whether it be family, friends, or a sponsor or whatever. But dude, I'm so thankful that we get to do this thing. So thanks for sharing some time, telling us about you, and for those of you who have joined and stuck through, thank you. This is a continuous effort for us to be able to build a life to where we can have honest and real conversations with people, and for you to have a space where you can just glean wisdom from. And I hope that today you learned something about leadership and about accountability, what it looks like, and how it can positively affect your world. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Cheers.